Valkyrie, a short story by Michael Chu. I wish I could remember the last thing my mother said to me before she walked out the door with my father on that morning all those years ago. It was cold and gray, and a stifling haze hung over everything, including my memories. That was the last time I saw my parents alive. They had been volunteering at a local hospital as we tried to cope with the aftermath of the devastating attacks on Switzerland when the Omnic forces swept through Europe during the crisis. My parents were killed in an airstrike there. We never allowed ourselves to believe the people who we love will disappear, and we rarely prepared to say goodbye when the time comes. In the days after, people assured me that the hurt would lessen with time, but even today, that pain comes back at the slightest reminder. Like on days like these, while I have been working at the aid camp on the outskirts of Cairo, every day the scope of the problems we face seems insurmountable. I've been living in Egypt for the better part of the last 2 years, but it was just one of my many homes since my tenure as the head of medical research for Overwatch ended. The damage to my professional reputation was such that I needed a change. I moved between Poland, South Korea, and Venezuela, where people only knew me as Dr. Angela Ziegler, not Mercy. The projects that I devoted almost a decade of my life to had either been scrapped, sold, or reassigned out of my control. My few friends in Overwatch had scattered. I know that Lena has continued to help where she can, despite everything that happened and the risks. Reinhard is traveling across Europe, dragging poor Brigitte with him, while Sojourn keeps a low profile in Canada. And of course, Genji is always busy. The last I heard from him, he was heading home to find his brother. Torbjorn is probably the wisest of us all, returning to Gothenburg, and Ingrid in retirement. But everywhere I went, I felt the echoes of Overwatch and my own guilt over the problems we had left behind when it had all fallen apart, which is what led me to Egypt. Overwatch was responsible for much of the country's suffering, and I needed to help repair it, but I had not received a warm welcome. Go home, they'd tell me. You've done enough damage. The truth is that in their time of need, people still expect us to come to their aid, even as they curse us. I didn't become a doctor to be thanked. Jack Morrison looked good for a dead man. Death had not softened his square jaw nor hardened the guileless innocence that gave him the look of a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. Despite the scars slashed across his face, I sensed that his greatest scars were in his head, despite the recent festering wound on his back. It was the latter of these injuries that had brought him to my mostly unfurnished apartment just off the Kal I Khalili souk. When I pushed him for details, Morrison was typically taciturn. He'd always been a textbook example of a difficult patient. Stubbornness is the only thing with a chance of killing him, came the voice from the kitchen. The voice's owner, Anna Amari, was rummaging through my kitchen cupboards for tea, making herself right at home. It seemed Morrison hadn't been alone in miraculous recoveries. We'd all believed that Anna had been killed by a sniper's bullet in Poland, and yet here she was. She looked older and thinner, showing a slight frailty that for the first time in as long as I had known her, made me think of her as mortal. She still possessed the statuesque posture of a military officer. That hardness had been tempered, and she displayed a new softness I didn't remember from before. I can try to run some tests, but I don't have the equipment I need here, I said, applying an aesthetic sealing spray to Jack's back. This is an aid camp, not a genetics lab. Time isn't something we have a lot of, Morrison said dryly. Just give me a few med kits. I'll make do. I'll see what I can scrounge up for you. I thought about the trio of biotic grenades he carried and the cartridge darts tucked in Amari's bandolier, items stolen from Overwatch, or in the case of the darts, an adaptation of my technology that had been made without my approval. Just another example of how my time with Overwatch hadn't gone the way I wanted. My irritation surprised me. I should have been happy to know that Jack and Anna were alive, but they were both a very physical manifestation of something that I was trying to escape, and I could feel walls spring up between me and whatever they had brought with them. I dug through the boxes of supplies that made up most of my living room furniture, finding mostly rolls of bandages, sealed bottles of antibiotics, and miscellaneous medical equipment. They wouldn't do much for Morrison's current situation. Overwatch's footprint had been so massive that even now, years after its disbandment, its echoes could be felt everywhere, from Egypt's crumbling infrastructure to the mundane familiarity of a light blue package of bandages. If I was being honest, escaping Overwatch had been, at best, an optimistic goal. Jack started picking through some of the supply crates, making a small pile next to him. What are you going to do here, Angela? Trying to find some medkits, I shot back, like you asked. That's not what I meant. He was turning over a particular expensive medical scanner in his hands, quizzically. What are you doing here in Cairo? That's delicate. I glowered and snatched it from him, tossing it back into the box with a little thud that made me wince. I let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. There are people here who need help. What was I doing here? I told myself it was to help, that there were people here who needed me. Egypt had too many problems and not enough people who were willing to help, with vultures preying at the edges of society. It wasn't as glamorous or exciting as my previous postings, but it was uncontroversial and it was helpful. Surely a hospital or a lab at a university would better suit you, Anna said, having apparently found some tea leaves to her liking. As it turns out, being a prominent ex Overwatch official isn't the sort of experience on your CV that people are looking for, I snapped. I took a deep breath. It was as though the years had never passed and we were right in the heated arguments of the last time we'd all been together. I'd prefer to keep a low profile, more than I can say about the two of you. Jack scowled. At least my enemies know that I'm coming for them. Your enemies? I asked incredulously. The United States government? Germany's largest bank? Helix Security? Did I miss anything? Lumerico. Jack had the temerity to sound proud of himself. And Mexico's largest energy company, which incidentally is run by their incredibly popular former president and universally loved war hero, I sighed. Those enemies won't do much for your reputation. Collateral damage is an avoidable part of war, Morrison said matter of factly. You were always good at rationalizing things, I said. I understood that in his former position, flexibility of thought was crucial to survival, but it seemed that trait had survived into his new life. I'm getting closer to finding the ones responsible. I'm getting closer to the truth. The further that crept into his voice sounded like obsession. The truth, I said flatly. The truth about what happened to Overwatch, about Talon, Switzerland, about everything. That's my new mission. It doesn't seem that new, other than the masks. What would you have me do then? Jack snapped. Fly to Gibraltar and join up with Winston? You think the same people who brought down Overwatch won't take him down too? Winston saw that the problems in the world were growing, and he saw Overwatch as the solution to everything. I don't think Winston ever questioned why things had fallen apart. He loved it, and needed it too much to see how it had damaged and changed us all. Being in that room with Jack and Anna only reinforced to me that we were all still broken. Doing the same thing as we had done in the past would only lead to another disaster. The world didn't need that now. Winston's heart was in the right place, but that didn't mean he was right. Let Winston play hero, Jack said dismissively. I'll do what needs to be done. Reyes, Agundamu, Maximilian, Viali, Sombra, Odellarain, the rest of them. They'll be dealt with. Reyes, just the mention of his name caused a shiver. I thought I'd buried all three of them, Morrison, Amari, Reyes, but their ghosts lived on. We were all responsible, Jack. Overwatch is gone. Your personal revenge won't change anything. Someone has to make them pay. I will get justice. Justice, I scoffed. I could see the pain consumed him like an affliction. If you keep this up, you will have proven to the world that Overwatch really did become the thing they feared. I wish you could see that. When I first stepped into Morrison's corner office all those years ago, things were very different. I was bright-eyed and excited, fresh from my post as the head of surgery of the University Hospital in Zurich. Initially, I thought I had walked into a museum exhibit. Scattered around the walls were photos of Morrison with various heads of state, pictures of the strike team, and memorabilia from his military career. There was a shelf of books, multi-volume sets of historic texts, including an ancient leather-bound edition of Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War and biographies of prominent generals, all neatly arranged against the side of the wall. There was a chessboard on the sideboard, frozen mid-game, with a dog-eared copy of Bobby Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games set beside it, and sitting behind his large desk was Jack Morrison himself. I saw your paper. Excellent. It gave me an idea, he said. He was referring to my recently published paper on nanobiotic healing. I believed it had the potential to completely revolutionize the way that medical care was given, not just in the examination room, but also throughout the entire structure of the medical profession. It was hard to be patient, and I'd believed that Overwatch offered me the opportunity to rapidly get my ideas out there in a way no other organization could. You read my paper? I asked incredulously at the thought of him poring over an extremely technical research paper that most grad students would need time to digest. I think I got the gist of it. Jack chuckled. I spared him the embarrassment of grilling him further. After all, he was offering me the keys to the kingdom. I do try to keep the abstracts very readable, I smiled. Angela, I want you to join Overwatch as our head of medical research. With our resources, we can help you develop your nanobiotic technology. Imagine how everyone's lives will change. You would improve the life expectancy of every person around the world. I had imagined with some advances in artificial intelligence, and with a serious manufacturing behind it, biotic technology could be spread around the world. The barrier to medical care would lower, and perhaps even the amount of time people needed to spend. It would open new paradigms in care, and Morrison was promising to do this for me. Money, resources, personnel. I know that you're the kind of person who want to do things your own way, and you could. You call the shots. You make the rules. I could use a new postdoc, Commander, I said. Have any lying around? You'd be surprised what I can rustle up, Morrison said as he looked out the window at the courtyard below. An orderly grid of blue-armored peacekeepers made their way across the lawn. I've had more than enough soldiers. What I need are thinkers, dreamers, people who want to make the world a better place. You could be on the cusp of a breakthrough that could change the lives of every living person on the planet. I want to make that a reality and take away all the roadblocks so that you can focus on revolutionizing your field. It was an amazing offer. It sounded perfect, but I heard the voice in my head. Whenever something sounded too good to be true, Altart in Gunt zum Glimmer was one of Torbjorn's favorite phrases. All that glitters is not gold. I questioned everything. It was a habit I had always had, even when I was a child, but my education and perhaps my proximity to Torbjorn had sharpened it. It was mostly to my benefit. It helped me to do the science, but it did give people a certain prickly opinion of me. It's a generous offer, but I do have some reservations, I said. Try me. I want to focus on civilian and peacetime applications of my work. I don't want to create ways for Overwatch commanders to send people into danger. Morrison steepled his fingers. The Omnic crisis has been over for over 10 years. Overwatch was built to win the war, but they've given me a new mission now, to make the world a better place. We invested in research in biology, chemistry, infrastructure, climatology, every scientific endeavor that can better people's lives. But I want you to be part of this. You could be responsible for one of the biggest shifts in human life since the creation of Omnics. When I looked at Morrison with his military regulation haircut and his medals and commendations, all I could see was a soldier. Even his posture said so. It was like I could see the threads that had been strung through him that pulled him to attention. thread spun by a lifetime of military molding, a soldier with the gift of believing in his orders. If I had the chance to make a difference in the world, a real difference, didn't I owe it to do anything in my power to make it a reality? But I had known Morrison for a long time, and he had done much good, and he had good people working for him who looked up to him and respected him. I had no doubt he believed what he said, and more than that, I wanted to believe what he said. I know what your values are, Angela. I've known it for years. It would be a privilege for you to help us with our mission, Morrison said. No more grant applications, no more haggling for new equipment. Whatever you want, you have my word. Postdocs? I smiled. As many as you need. I had fallen asleep at my desk when I was jolted awake by an explosion. It felt as though the ground itself sighed, and then several smaller impacts caused the windows to rattle in their frames. The lights flickered. I could feel the bass drum rumble of thunder in the distance. But as anyone who has lived through war knows, there is weather and there is war. I quickly dressed. I had lived in Cairo long enough to know what came after the sounds of thunder. We'd have to get the camp ready to receive patients. Not long after, Morrison and Anna appeared in the doorway like two wraiths in the darkness. Their familiar faces had been replaced with their masks, their only expressions an illuminated line of red and one diamond of blue. What's going on here? I asked. There's been an attack on an Anubis facility. We need to go now. Morrison's voice was distorted through some mechanism in his mask that covered his mouth. It manipulated his voice, taking out whatever humanity was left. Helix will get the situation under control. You only get caught in the crossfire. It's Talon, Jack said. I knew that tone. There was no convincing him otherwise. Angela, there are people out there caught in the crossfire. They need help that Helix cannot give them. Angela interrupted my protest. Are you willing to come with us? I knew better than anyone the state of emergency care in Cairo. The last attacks had left a swath of destruction, with parts of the city still trying to recover. I still had people in my camps who had been displaced or injured in the last breakout. Helix was a peacekeeping force, but in my mind, they were little better than mercenaries. They were paid to protect the interests of the government, not its people, an unsurprising replacement for Overwatch. I should stay at the camp. I should get everything in order and prepare to triage an influx of people. I knew what I should do. I'm coming. I kept the Valkyrie suit in one large packing crate. The biometric lock snapped open with a satisfying thunk. I laid the pieces out, the breastplate, the communications and scanning visor, the biotic charges, the propulsion system, and the staff, each in their specific molded foam padding for transit, each unused for some time. As I ran my hand over the white breastplate to lift it from the foam padding, I could still feel the signs of damage from my time in the field, scratches, dents, and reminders of how dangerous it had all been. I affixed the clasp, and as the power turned on, it molded to me. The hand grips on the staff had been indented to the shape of my hands where I'd clutched it in desperate situations. The headset and processing unit was the lifeblood of it all, the nervous system that provided me with the information I needed. It all still fit, but I'd forgotten just how heavy the suit was.